Hi, I'm Justin Worland, correspondent at Time Magazine. I'm really thrilled to be here today with Mr. Carlos Alvarado Quesada, who is the president of Costa Rica. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Justin, for having us.
My first question is about same-sex marriage. Just went into effect a few weeks ago in Costa Rica. You championed this issue when you ran for president, but there were a lot of Costa Ricans who are opposed. How did you make the case that this was the right thing to do?
Well, human rights is written in plural, and there's a reason for that. It's a set of rights that cover all of the people around the world, and it's a worldview and a global ethic. So, in terms of egalitarian marriage, it's a way to protect the community of LGBT people, but also it's a way to reinforce not only one specific right, but the strength of the whole set of rights. It's a message of equality and of respect. And that was the key message we tried to send. When you defend one set of human rights, you're defending them all, and you're defending all people altogether. So I know there's lots of people that don't support that, but then from a worldview of respect and of living all together, it's the right thing to do.
I'm curious, here in the U.S., there was a big change in public opinion, since same-sex marriage was legalized here. A lot of people who didn't support it at the time now support it. Of course, it's only been a few weeks in Costa Rica, but do you sense a change in public opinion since you ran for president? I mean, are people thinking about this issue differently?
I do believe this is going to change gradually, because at that beginning it has a lot to do with being a taboo topic. But then when you see the concrete experiences of families, even with their own children, being people that love each other and their parents, and the difficulties they have confronted, sometimes people that have been bullied, even being hit, when you see those realities, then there's a lot of conscience that emerge and a lot of empathy. So even though many people might not agree with that, they also start to understand there's a very strong human part of this in terms of equality. So I do believe that as time will go by, people will going to be more positive and will agree more on the same-sex marriage.
Right. Costa Rica is the first country in Central America to legalize same-sex marriage. Do you anticipate others following? Are you the leader for the region in this regard?
Well, we respect very much the sovereignty of other countries and other regions. We take this stand, and I take it particularly for Costa Rica because that's how I presented as a candidate, and I stood for this position. Even though that I know that this might set a discussion in other places, but that being said, we are very respectful of what other countries nearby or in other latitudes the stand they take in front of this issue.
That makes sense, but even with that said, do you have any discussions? Do other leaders come to you perhaps and say, how do you do that? Or is that something that you're talking about actively? I mean, obviously not imposing on their sovereign right, but are you having that kind of discussion constructively?
Well, when people ask me, I say what is on my mind and on my heart and on my principles. If one believes in liberty and if one believes in equality, then the right thing to do is to extend this right to all of the people. Similarly, when women decades ago were not able to vote, currently that is an idea that people say that was nonsense, but at the time there was a very strong debate on that. Similarly, with other issues such as slavery. Currently, same-sex marriage is a topic that's very debated, but I do believe that for us, the way to lead, similarly in decarbonization or in peace matters, is through example. and we choose to lead by example. And I believe this is what we're doing now as well.
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the topic that you can't escape these days, of course, the pandemic, COVID, and talk about Costa Rica's response. You were praised very early on for your response, for helping, for stemming the spread within your country. What did you do right?
Well, I believe there are several items, let's say, that we got right. First of all, we have a robust social security system. So our response through our security system and through our health authorities was an early response. Also, our early detection of emergency system responded at the time, and we managed to close strategic activities while not enforcing a complete lockdown. So we closed strategic activities related to certain areas that were risky areas related to COVID, but we remain part of our economy moving. So that's part of the success, also having a strong follow-up on the nexus between the cases, and it's a very intensive follow-up. And today, even though we're experiencing a second wave of COVID-19, having a population of 5 million inhabitants, we have regretfully 12 people that had died of COVID-19. But this means that our mortality rate is very low. Our mortality rate till yesterday was 0.5%, which is one of the lowest. And that's a lot because of our social security system, and also that population is following up on the recommendations of government, of the Ministry of Health, and also a joint work between the private sector and the public sector.
You've advocated for a multilateral approach, particularly with regard to technology, vaccine, a future vaccine. Can you just speak a bit about the importance of working together, of multilateral engagement on this issue? Why is it so important? And what do you hope to see in terms of multilateral engagement?
Well, one can see that, let's say 4 months ago, the knowledge we had, not only as a country, but as an international community, was small compared to what we know now about COVID-19. And that we have achieved through cooperation. For example, in the case of Costa Rica, in one of our institutes, we are developing a treatment that takes the plasma from patients that had recovered from COVID-19 and working with labs, and for example, working with horses. You applied certain proteins and you can come up with a plasma to apply it to people that need the treatment. And that we developed using technology from snake bites, treatment for snake bites. So we applied that technology to COVID-19. That would not have been possible without cooperation with other countries and with other institutes. That being said, this means that whenever we coordinate, it's not the sum only of the parts, but we can also have an exponential response, an exponential answer to have a faster recovery on COVID-19. If we lock ourselves within ourselves, the recovery for the global community is going to be one that's going to be weaker, slower, and that in terms not only of health, but also in terms of the economy, is going to affect all of us. Because let's say only a few countries in the developed world manage to defeat COVID-19. But then we live in a such interlinked world that if the rest of the world economies are devastated, we are going to be devastated. There's no one scenario in which one or two countries overcome COVID and they are okay and the rest are not. Either we manage to recover all as a global community, or the harm is going to be for all of us.
That's a great, important point. I'm curious about, being here in the U.S., where we have an outbreak that is continuing to grow, and Costa Rica, of course, welcomes generally many Americans every year. Do you anticipate opening the borders to Americans? I mean, is this something, or I should say, in the near term?
Well, currently we're working in the protocols for opening the airport to having commercial and tourist flights coming back to Costa Rica. We still have pending the date in which we're going to do it, and we're going to do it progressively. That means we're going to start with a limited number of flights and a limited number of markets, or let's say countries. And those decisions we're going to take with our tourism sector, with the airlines, and also looking at the countries of origin and the situation. So those are the things we're going to wait on a balance for that progressive opening of our airspace. That being said, we're eager to reopen our country and our tourism to the United States. 60% of our tourism comes from the United States. We're a very interlinked, we have very interlinked economies, and our interest is in the fastest manner to reopen our space flights with the United States, but then we need to wait to have the protocols in place to make it in a safe way.
Right. Well, I want to talk about climate change. We've talked about climate before, and actually also talk about climate change and COVID. And of course, in this moment, lots of people, lots of thinkers are talking about spending money to revitalize the economy in the wake of COVID on green initiatives. So I'm just curious whether you're using this opportunity to expedite some of the green initiatives to stimulate the economy.
Absolutely. This is a great opportunity to start over, but in a more decarbonized way. And I do believe that, for example, financial plans for reconstruction and recovery had to take into account addressing sustainability and the climate crisis, addressing inclusion, gender. It's a great catalyst to think about building a new world. Whatever we decide as a country or as a global community in the next 6 months or 12 months is going to determine what happens in the earth for the next decade. It's a great opportunity to foster human talent. So we are working lots of things in education, for example, on training teachers, on building infrastructure in education, both for the economic recovery, but also to provide better services. And given that many students have to stay at their homes, we are accelerating the access to the internet and to knowledge virtually for students and also for teachers. That's one area that's very exciting. One very challenging area, on the other hand, is how we manage to have fiscal and economic stability. But that's why we globally are looking for gathering groups of countries, not with conditions, but with compromise. Compromise for better education, for reducing poverty, for sustainability, and for fighting climate change. For us in Costa Rica, one way to do it is invest more in innovation for climate change and less in military spending. That's one of the things we advocate for because we believe in that.
Right. Well, that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much. It's great to talk to you.
No, thank you. Hope to talk to you again.